Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at literally all the cars that I've owned. So I did a list the other day. I've spent around 40k on cars in total. Unfortunately, look, a lot of it's been like recycled money, so I don't think I've ever had to give away a car. I've lost money on a couple, but we'll go through one by one. So we're going to start right at the beginning. An undisclosed year Volkswagen Beetle. So this is going to go straight into S rank. There's no debating it. Okay, so not only I'm going to be rating these cars via like the actual car, but the memories attached to them, as well as like actually getting your money's worth. So back in about 2007, we picked up this car for $350, and this is a little bit of a cheat counting this car in because one, it was signed in my dad's name, and two, it wasn't even like completely my money. Technically, me and my brother went halves. Technically, my dad bought it because he took the money out of his wallet. Long story short, my dad is self-employed still, but at the time he was running a fencing business. And when we come out and we'd help him mix the cement and do little bits and bobs, he'd give us $20 for the day for coming out and helping him, which is nice. Anyway, we did a few days in a row, Christmas holidays, whatever, and then a month or two later, he bought us this car, which was really cool. I remember picking it up. It needed like a button to start it. It was rusty, it was dusty, but like it was fun. It was so much fun. In Perth, Australia, there's a little section. They're slowly deleting it now, which really sucks, but the Nangara Pines is like a little area where you're not actually allowed to drive vehicles around it, but everybody does. It's kind of like a gentleman's agreement. So you hardly ever see the rangers or the police down there unless people are causing trouble, which we never did. So we would literally just drive it up to the pines, deflate the tires a bit, and then just drive it through. A couple of times we got stuck, but because they're so light, they traveled quite well on the sand, and especially in the pines, there's a lot of gravel areas, and it was just fine. But yeah, it was a great car, from what I can remember, and we still own it. So it's been turned into like a Mad Max build. I'll have to put a video up of it one day, but it's a bit of a Mad Max build. There's none of the original body parts. And it's got a different motor in it. It's gone down from the 1600cc to the 1300cc just because the 1300cc is easier to find and it was cheaper. Like, people were more willing to sell the 1300cc. So yeah, no, it was a great car, great memories attached to it. I can still smell it. Like, certain cars just have a smell to it. It wasn't a bad smell, it's just I can just still smell it in the back of my head. Next up, we're going to go to I'm going to try and make this video not ridiculously long, okay? But I've got 21 cars to get through. Now with this one, quickly go off price. So bought it for $350. We never sold it, but I distinctly remember selling a lot of body parts for it to some guy on the Quokka back when that was still a thing. Like my dad did, we didn't do any of the talking or anything, for like $500. So we made $150 profit, kept the car, kept the memories. Yeah, it's a great car. Next car was also $500, bought in 2011, so 5 years in the future. Again, it's going S tier. Now, not everything's going to go in S tier, I promise. 1998 Daewoo Lanos. Now again, this is actually pretty close to the red that I had on my Lanos. I never actually took any photos of it. I don't know why. I repainted it. Again, another great memory with my dad. He taught us how to scrub down and repaint a car. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to do it again by myself. So if every time we buy a car with a bad paint job, I think Dad sort of like, oh no, not again. But yeah, so he helped me scrub it down. It had a bit of a dent in it, but it was only $500 with 124,000 kilometers, which is quite low for like any car that age, but especially one for $500. It had zero mechanical issues, and I remember my dad taught me how to change oil on the car. I learned how to change a tire on this car. Obviously learned how to paint it. I changed the one of the front fenders by myself. We went down and bought a new fender and a new seatbelt clip. There was this weird bit where my auntie just left a whole bunch of shit at our house. In that pile of shit, there was a new stereo, chucked a Sony Exploder in it. I now had a $500 car or a $200 sound system. I bought some new speakers for it as well. But yeah, the whole cost of the vehicle would have been under, with the paint job included, would have been well under $900. I drove it around for a year or two. It took me a long time to pass my actual driver's test. I think I actually started it when I was like 17. Actually got my license when I was 19. And that took me through the whole experience. So yeah, I learned to drive in it as well. And the great thing was it doesn't have ABS, doesn't have power steering, and it doesn't have, I think it didn't have power windows either. It didn't have a lot of extras, but the good thing was you actually got to learn to control the car. You know, I was manual as well, obviously. Can't be no self-respecting tradie let their son drive an automatic for their first car, I think. So, and it didn't have a tachometer, so you had to learn to listen to the motor, which is good. It's a skill you can take across the different vehicles. But yeah, no, it was great little car. Very similar, like you can see that they were kind of going for a European look Honda Civic. So with the Daewoo's, a little interesting fact is they actually had a guy come over from another car brand, I can't forget, it was Citroen or Peugeot, and they actually took him on to redesign all the cars, and that's why the Nibiru and the Lantra and the Lanos all have those sort of curves to it. My mum had a Nibiru as well, and that was fantastically reliable, but being that Daewoo only really made their own standalone cars for a few years, we must have been the only ones to get these amazing sort of customer satisfaction levels out of them. Next car that we have, alright, car number 3. Now, this next one was a 1991 Toyota Camry. So on the last car, after I spent about $900 on it probably in total, not including you know, just routine maintenance, which I did spend a lot on. Not because I had to, after I learned to change oil, I just got really pedantic with it, and I was doing it like every 3,000-4,000 Ks, because I don't know, I just felt like it was worth it. Like at the time I was really enamored with the shape of the car, and yeah, it sounds pretty weird to say, you know, considering it's a Daewoo of all things, but I really liked it, and at the time it was the right level of speed for myself, especially when you're revving it out, you know, it could really move. And I just loved the fact I was an apprentice at the time making like $6.40 an hour, and you know, like 16, 17, whatever, and you could chuck in like $10 of petrol and it would get around, because you got to remember, because it didn't have all those extras, it didn't have to power all that weight, didn't have all the big heavy electric window motors to carry around, it didn't have power steering pump to carry around, so it was ridiculously cheap on fuel. Like, I don't even think my Hyundai is that cheap on fuel. So anyway, I sold it for $750. It was like a weird sale. My father-in-law sort of said, oh no, this guy wants to buy a car, he'll give you $750 for it. I think my daughter was about to be born, and it had this weird issue because it just did not have an exhaust pipe. Like, an exhaust pipe came from the engine and curled under to the undercarriage of the car, and then there was just nothing. So it was super loud. You talk about straight pipes, it just had no pipe. So all the exhaust fumes would come into the back seats, so we couldn't have that with the baby. So anyway, we sold that off. Before we sold that off, I actually bought the next car, but we'll go at one car at a time. So we're looking about, let's say about, we lost our $150 so far. Okay, but we've made a little bit back on the Beetle. Next car that I bought, and I actually bought it for my wife back in 2012, is a 1991 Toyota Camry, and we're going to chuck that straight into A tier. Now, I gotta say, it was a great car, very, very heavy on fuel for what I was used to at the time, but the aircon worked, which was great, and the had power windows, the suspension was just broken in it. Like, I paid $950, I think. I remember I rocked up, and it was an African gentleman, We started chatting, and I was like trying to negotiate down the price. It had so many Ks, like it had like 500,000 Ks. And at the time I didn't know much about cars, so like there wasn't a straight panel on it, and I kind of wanted a car that, after having a Daewoo, I was like, I kind of wanted a car that wasn't like some weird brand. So we're talking, and then and you gotta remember I still had allowance at this time, so I wasn't really too concerned about the fuel consumption and stuff. I remember it had no petrol in it, like I had about 10 cents of petrol, fuel light was on, fuel gauge was like below E, so we're talking, and I think now I could probably, same situation, I'd be able to get him down to like $700, but I only got him down to $50, bought the car. One of the headlights was out. Again, these aren't pictures of the exact cars that I had. This is just the same one, the same colour. Drove it around for about 6 months, towed all my stuff from Perth to York in it. And with my dad again, gave us hand moving. And yeah, it was a good car, but yeah, it was just in really rough shape. I chucked a stereo in this one as well. I don't think, at that age, no car passed my ownership without getting a fresh Sony Explode in it. And the funny thing is, they're not great head units, they're just cheap. I could always pick one up, ex-display unit, for like under $80. So, you know, I had the USB, which was big at the time because, you know, I didn't have Spotify. I was a late adapter of Spotify until like 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. So yeah, I was a late adapter of Spotify, so I think I still like just the YouTube to MP3, chuck like 30, 40 songs on a USB, plug it straight into the head unit, or use your phone. Yeah, and I think I was still doing a lot of weird, like older stuff at the time. Like I still had an iPod, so I just used aux. But yeah, no, it was a great car, A tier for sure. Alright, so next car we're going to look at, and oh boy, when you talk about getting ripped off, you got to talk about this piece of fucking shit. $2,000 I paid for this car. So the reason why I sold this is I wanted a ute. I was still working in trades. That would all change in a few weeks anyway. I ended up getting fired or let go, whatever you want to say. The guy said he was running out of money, so whatever you want to call that situation. But I didn't know this at the time, and he willingly let me buy a ute. So I sold this car, $750. I bought this car for $1,000, sold it for $1,000, pretty much. I think I might have actually made $50 out of it because I sold it for $1,000. I specifically remember advertising it for $1,200 because I replaced the broken headlight, and that was like $50. So yeah, I think I broke even on that car. So far we're doing pretty good. All right, but this car just ruins that street. Okay, so I paid $2,000 for it. And my granddad's a tow truck driver and an ex-mechanic or whatever, and he used to say like, there's no such thing as a cheap truck. And unfortunately he's right. So this piece of shit, it was actually in better condition than this one in here. It had the like the metal back ute rather than the one that matches that's color coded to the body. And it was super long, dual cab. No aircon, I remember the heater working. But yeah, the head gasket was blown. And again, I knew how to service cars, but I didn't know what a head gasket brake was at the time, to be honest. And yeah, it was fucked. Paid $2,000 for it, and yeah, it was within 2 weeks the motor had pretty much cooked itself. It was still driving around, like you go down to the shops with it and stuff, but it would be like a kettling on the way back. And I remember it overheated on me on the way back to York. Way back from Perth to York, and like nobody would help me. The baby was crying, and I ended up swapping and looking after the baby. And after Sarah stood on the side of the road and people thought it was a woman by herself, like somebody stopped after about 30 seconds, almost caused an accident, you know. Oh, I'm the hero. Oh, you make out with me, please, you know. But no, yeah, $2,000 down the drain, pretty much. I think I sold it for like scrap metal price, more or less. Yeah, I think the rego eventually ran out on it, and I just didn't. It was fucking shitbox. I paid the rego when it was still broken. I had the intention to fix the head gasket. Like the interior was clean, the exterior was clean. It was actually a nice car. If it wasn't an old Mitsubishi. So unfortunately, it's just they get to that age, And I think that's why they've got the diamond warranty now. They've got a little bit of a reputation for being quite shit. But yeah, in this case, unfortunately, it's a little bit too little too late for myself. So yeah, that was quite disappointing. But that's alright. Next car was another Mitsubishi, but I ended up taking another chance of it because it was 10 years newer. So that was like 1994. No, that was 1994. So this was 7 years newer. So this was, and this one looks spittingly like the one I had. So I had the V6 Executive Magna. I'm going to put it in A or B tier. I'm going to go A tier. Not quite S tier. It was a nice car. It actually drove very well, but the whole car was like just never loved. Like somebody bought this car from the beginning and just never waxed it. And like, I don't know how cheap these Magnas were back in the day, but they must have been significantly cheaper than Falcons because you still see them everywhere. Like, they must have sold a shit ton of them this particular year. And the paintwork just goes to crap straight away. The roof lining falls down, and then once the roof lining falls down, the stop light at the back falls down. I paid, I think, $1,500 for this car. I ended up selling it for like $1,100. I chucked in it already had a nice stereo, and it actually had a sub with no amp. Like, the guy was like ridiculously dumb who bought it before me, or owned it before me. The fuel pump, the fuel sender was gone. So I ended up replacing that at local wreckers for like $100, I think it was. I ended up getting 2 new tyres for it, but that's all preventative maintenance. So let's say I'm in the whole car for $1,600. Was there anything else I had to do? I chucked in a reversing camera very stupidly, and this is before I lost so I bought the reversing camera before I lost that job, and then I remember installing it because I was nervous before I had my interview to go into disability work. I remember installing the actual camera on the morning of, just because I just couldn't sit around and be nervous all day. So very foolishly, I'm in my white shirt crawling underneath the car, making this cable up to go to from the back of the car to the front of the car. So yeah, let's say I'm in the car for about $1,700. I sold it for $1,100 or $1,200. I thought I actually planned on painting the car because I got the roof lining back up again, and got the tail light up fixed. The tail light was drooping down when I bought it, and yeah, it was a nice car. The doors didn't lock, like all of them, from the inside of the car. When you locked it from the outside, it did. And I think all the windows went up and down. It was a nice car. It actually drove very well. And that's the thing that used to get me about the car, is you drive it and you go, oh man, this is really nice. And you subconsciously forget you were driving a shit car. So it's almost like you got horrified each time you got out of the car. Like, oh crap, I forgot I was driving a piece of crap. Alright, let's get on to the next car, because I've been going on for about 20 minutes, just waffling on. Okay, so after this, I did buy another ute. After this is when I bought my nice car, which I still own to this day. This goes straight in S tier. I paid $17,000 for this car. So another little side note with the Magna, I got pulled over all the time in this car. It's just because I was a young bloke driving a V6 that was not well looked after. And it's just like, generally in Australia, this is a car that like an unemployed person would have, or like somebody who's just generally annoying to society. But yeah, $17,000. I used to get a loan for this car, and I'm so happy that it was a reliable car, because if it actually had any of the problems that you would normally have with any car, that I wouldn't have been able to afford to bank the loan, to be honest. I was paying 240 Australian dollars a fortnight for it over a 5-year loan. So I think I ended up paying like quite a bit more than $17,000 for it. I still own this car 8 years later. I bought it with 60,000 kilometers on it, and I've done another 210,000. So I've just gone over 250,000 kilometers. I've had to replace the front bumper twice because of the same accident, and the first time the guy didn't repair it properly. So I'm probably in it for about 24,000, but 17,000. Let's say strictly 17,000 purchasing the car. Of course, I've had to replace like some parts on the car. So I replaced the radiator, the crankshaft sensor, and one of the wheel bearings. But over 8 years, and given that like 180,000 or 190,000 kilometers is like what some people expect to get out of a car in total, and it's done that just with me. I plan to get another 3 years out of it, the way it's driving now, at least. I'm very happy with this car, S tier. Like, I've got so many memories with this car. So cheap to drive. Chuck $50 in, get 650 kilometers range. Yeah, great car. Next up, we're going to go another little ute I bought. I'm going to go A tier. This one was so reliable. So it was in the family for about 2 or 3 years. I think I had it for about 1.5 years, and I gave it to my father-in-law because he'd had a bad run with his Pajero, and then this Hilux he picked up, which is this weird 70s Hilux. He picked it up, and then there was an issue, and anyway, it was my little way of paying him back for all the driving lessons and stuff that he'd given me, and I guess just being accepting and stuff for me and the family. But yeah, he had a bad run of cars. I had 3 cars at the time, and we'll come into why I had 3 cars in a second. But yeah, I gave it to him. He sold it for more than I paid for it. So he sold it for like $1,500. I only paid like $1,200 or $1,100 for the car. It had no power steering. I think it had a heater. Definitely no aircon. Manual. And yeah, it was just the basicest of cars, but it was just a ute, and it was so useful. It was good to have around. It was reliable as shit. I think eventually the heater went out on it, and my father-in-law just cut a piece of garden hose and just deleted it, and then it was just fine. It never overheated again after that. Just tightened the hose clamps down nice and tight, and it was fun. The next car I bought was actually off my friend, and we're going to chuck it in A tier. And I think that this car was just little gets. I think I paid under $2,000 for it. I can't remember exactly. It was $1,600 or $1,700. But I know I was selling it for about $1,500. This car was sold, $300 profit. And yeah, it was sold a couple $100 less than what I paid for it. But it was a nice car. It was 4-door. Had no complaints. I just wanted something with a little bit more space after that, but very fuel efficient. Chucked a dashboard on it, like a dash mat on it. Yeah, it had no troubles, trouble-free motoring. I've had a couple of Getzes. We'll get into the other one later on. But yeah, they're really good cars, really fuel efficient. They're just like basic motoring at its finest, really. At some point in York, I was given this car. I'll just put this in here now. I'll put it in, hey, where'd my shit ute go? Give back my shit ute. Anyway, we all know that the E-tier was somewhere in there. And that's where he belongs. Oh, as long as he's not up. Oh no, he did go up there. Anyway, we'll chuck this in. I'm going to chuck it in B, C tier. Anyway, it was just some car that was given me for $1. It was in really nice condition, or something like that. It was given to my father-in-law. He gave it to me. It was broken water pump or something in the end. I sold it to somebody for $50. It was actually registered when it was given to me, and then I just never ended up getting it fixed. I just wasn't getting enough hours in York to really have any spare money. I just never got it fixed. It was a real shame. It was in good condition. The interior was in great condition, and it would have been a really nice car, but it just didn't repair it. Okay, so last car of the York, or second last car of the York era. So when I sold the Getz, I moved on to a bigger car, which was the AE Falcon. And the AE Falcon's going to appropriately go in the A tier. Great car, petrol and LPG. One time I came to the car and randomly had like a whole bunch of coolant like leak out of it. Don't know why. Never happened again. Had a tow ball. Towed my first motorbike home on it. Well, first and only really so far. Massive amount of space. Really underrated car. Like, can't be stated enough. Oh, where'd all my things go? Okay, so next car and final car, and again, there's really not that much to say. I didn't own it for that long. So essentially what happened was my fridge broke down. Again, I wasn't getting a lot of hours in York a lot of the time. Like, I was getting like, my hours would fluctuate from like 25 hours a week to 50 hours a week, and the trouble was I got myself in debt. Like, I was working 50 hours every week. But that's right, worked my way out of it. Always like to fix things, not complain things. But what I ended up doing was selling the Falcon. Again, it was like I bought the car for 2,000. I sold it for like 1,600 or something. And then I think with the change, or a few weeks later or something. Anyway, I ended up with the $650 Honda Accord. I've done a review on this car before. I'm going to even chuck it in S tier. And let me tell you why it goes in S tier. $650. It didn't have aircon. The aircon, originally the car came out with aircon, it was just broken. But the heater worked great. Electric sunroof, electric windows, 4-wheel steering. So the back wheels steered as well, like a forklift, and they moved 1 or 2 inches to the side. When you went 110 in this bad boy, it felt like you were going 310. All right, so it was a great car. It rode really nice. It had some stuff in the car that's not even on my Ascent, like some of the stuff's on my Odyssey, but it's not on my Ascent. Like, it tells you which door's open when you open it. Already had a banging sound system in it when I bought it, like crazy sound system, subwoofer with a Pioneer head unit. Pretty much I'm a sucker for sound units. Had the alloy wheels. It was a great car, honestly. But quick side note, because it had such a bad oil leak, I put it up for sale, and for 20 minutes I had a 1998 Honda Accord that was lowered. And this is a situation of, when the deal's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Rocked up, the car was on stands. For some reason I ended up talking to the guy. I ended up having to like make a lie about my dad being a bricklayer. Like 20 labourers would come in to get my original Accord back because anyway, it was a whole mess. Ended up rocking up to Rockingham. It was like this little drug dealer unit, and anybody who's in Perth knows that Rockingham isn't exactly the most affluent area. It's a bit of a shithole, really. But fun fact, our Premier actually lives there, apparently. Can't imagine this guy's unit because it was shit. But yeah, almost got ripped off. Ended up getting a bit ripped off because I let him keep the sub in order to swap the cars back because I just wanted my reliable car back. It did bleed a shitload of oil, but for $650, it was just such an amazingly reliable car. This car I drove around for about 15 minutes before demanding my other car back because it was on stands. I couldn't test drive it. And as I was driving it away, me and my wife still joke about this all the time. As I was driving away, he goes, "Oh yeah, just letting you know the fuel gauge is broken, so you just cruise, eh? You just cruise, and the speedo's broken too, so you just cruise with the traffic." So I go to the nearest fuel station, fill it up. It's got no petrol in it, so he got a full tank of petrol out of it too. And yeah, it was like the most stupidest thing I've ever done in my life, honestly. So yeah, we're back to the Honda Accord, 1991. We're back in Perth, and after a little bit, I finally get my hands on this baby. So the Honda Accord eventually gets sold. I sell it to my mate for like $550 or something like that, $500, and we get my hands on this one. This is going to go in S tier, or no, I'm going to go A tier. Now, the sun faded to crap, but the thing was, I treated this thing like it was a Land Cruiser. I was going full driving in it like every second weekend. I remember one particular camping trip, I my sister-in-law and her partner in the back, me and my partner in the front. Like, it came with stock roof racks, and then I bought this thing from Audi that like created like a little luggage carrier section that was like 2 feet tall, strapped down. Everybody had stuff on them. It's completely overloaded. I carried trailers in this. I think I only had it for about 8 months before the clutch started to slip, but that was completely my fault. It started to slip because we got bogged one time and I couldn't get out for ages before I was pulled out. But yeah, it was a great car. Like, if you see one of these come up in good condition and you're looking for a cheap car, honestly, you can't beat it. It's the perfect size. It's actually a way bigger on the inside than you think. And the windows that it has are pillarless in the back. Like, it looks like it's designed in such a way where it looks like a bigger car than it is when you're sitting in it. It's got an unexpectedly high ride height. And yeah, it's the perfect size for most occasions. Like, it's not too big, not too small, nice and zippy. Aircon worked great, heater worked great. I gotta say, all the Hondas I've ever had have been amazing. So yeah, I had that for a while. When the clutch started to slip, I decided to go old school. And this is kind of like a bucket list car for me. I love Taragos, but we'll soon come to find Taragos don't always love me. I'm going to put this in B tier. Now, it's a great car. A little bit rusty. It slid around. So I did say I got to learn to drive that ABS and all that sort of thing, but the Lanos was nice and small, so I never had these issues. Also, this had a swapped engine in it. I ended up putting a sub that I found on the side of the road in it. Like, I found a sub and amp, like in 2 separate houses just on the side of the road, so I chucked that in it. Yeah, it was a great car. The only issue was that it would slide around in the winter, and also my wife couldn't drive it, so it was just too old. The cool thing is the back seats actually turn into a bed for camping, which is really cool, or just like general van lifing. So if you want like just a cheap van life build, that just doesn't stock. So then we went to the Subaru Outback, and again, this car I think I bought for $1,700, sold for $1,100. Now I skipped a few of these. Went and did that one, didn't do that one. This car bought for $1,200, sold for $550 once the clutch went out. This one here, I bought for $1,300. I ended up selling it for $1,100. And again, it had a little bit of transmission issues towards the end, but I went camping it a lot, went off-roading it a lot. Yeah, it's a really great car. Electric sunroofs again. Amazing interior. Like, so far you see all these cheap cars, so excluding the Hyundai Ascent from 2011, it by far had the nicest interior. We're talking wood panel, it was just so nice. I only had the 2.4, not the H6, but yeah, it was a great car. We'll try and slap a couple of these out while we're doing that. So I drove that around for a while, and then I think after that there's like a little range where I had like a whole bunch of shit cars in a row. And I think this is when we come into Taragoville. So then after that I went and bought this Tarago, and no. At this point I had my first of 2 shit Taragos. So I love Toyota as a brand, but I feel like their Taragos or their previous definitely have a use by date. And it turns out that when you see one for $650 on Marketplace, don't buy it. I ended up spending a couple $100 trying to get it on the road properly, and then it eventually just sounded like it was a rotary engine. It was just like misfiring like crazy. It got to the point where I didn't even want to sell it to someone. Like, I won't lie to people when I sell them a car. Like, if there's issues with it, I tell them there's issues with it. Like, for example, with the Subaru, I kind of knew there was a little bit training issues, but I just kind of said, like, needs work. Like, feels a little bit funny when you hit certain speeds, and it was still drivable, and it still could do 110. I just kind of wanted to get it off my hands. It was still drivable. It was still safe. I would never sell anybody an unsafe car, so what I ended up doing was driving it to my parents' place because they were closer to everything. They were closer to my work. Because I live in Ellenbrook, which is more or less the last suburb of actual Perth. And I rang up the wreckers. They came and picked it up. They gave me $250 cash. So yeah, I lost about $350 on that car, which isn't too bad, all things considered. And while we're here, let's just slap out the other one. Now this next one is bad. This next one, I chucked, and see, I love these eggshell Trios. I love everything about them. I love the interior. I love the exterior. I like the shape of them. I love the practicality of them. I love minivans. But, well, that went way too high. That doesn't go in A tier. These both got, all three of these are going to go in F tier. Yeah, all going in F tier now. If there's one lower than F tier, it's going in there too. But yeah, I paid $2,000 for this one because it looked in really nice condition, and yeah, it just started overheating like crazy. I went and got no, it wasn't a what? It ran well for 2 weeks. Sorry, the other one started overheating, and then I fixed it, and that's what I fixed for $200. This is the thermostat. But I didn't do it myself because it was missing, so I took it to the mechanic to see what else could be the problem. They said if it's missing, it can make it overheat because the radiator doesn't work like that. Anyway, long story short, it's been fucked off. This one I bought for $2,000. Had like not bald tires. The tires were actually had a lot of tread on them, but they were so old that I had to replace them both, but I only replaced one of them before I sold it. It was $500, and then one day when I went to start it, as I had it booked to get all four tires done, it just didn't start. Like, it sounded like the motor was ramming into the pit, like the pistons were ramming into the valves, and then magically it started again, but it sounded like shit. And that's when I sold it. And again, I was honest about the problem. Like, I didn't say that, I think that this is broken, but I just said, look, it sounds like shit, and I'm selling it to you as is, no warranty. I sold it for $500, so with the new tire on it, and I put a new head unit in it as well. So it had a really nice mechless Bluetooth head unit with the microphone, and it could link up to. That was like one of the best aftermarket head units I've ever seen, actually. So after that, I eventually went and got myself, so we skipped forward in time a bit. After the HRV and after the Mountain of Taragos, I eventually got myself a white Getz. We're going to put this in, I'm not going to disrespect it by putting it in a different one than the black Getz. It was a two-door. Oh no, you know what, it's a two-door. I'm going to put it in B. It's just basic motoring at its finest. What I find with the Getzes, another reason why I sold it, is that I almost overcompensated when I was driving these cars and drove a little bit harder, rev it out a little bit more, go a little bit faster. It's like I'm a short guy in a short car, and it just was too much short man syndrome for one guy, you know. But it was a nice car. I only paid about $2,000 for it. I sold it for about $1,600 to somebody who was like looking to give it to their daughter or something. They spun me some sort of sob story, so I was kind of happy to sell it to them, and yeah, I ended up buying this next little baby, which is an 07 Falcon. Now this was a really good looking car. The photo in here, this wasn't my exact one. Again, it's just random ones I found on the internet, the same thing. But again, it was another X-Taxi, dual fuel, $1,200. It had quite a few kilometers, I think 360,000 kilometers. And it had your tow ball, your dual fuel, your aircon. Aircon was so good in this car. So big, so comfortable, a lot of practical use. So yeah, just another Falcon wagon. I think I lost about, what did I sell it for? I crashed the car into a, like when I was parking it, just into one of those little trolley poles. So all this, like, headlight to here was banged up. The motor had an issue where the leads, so they're not actually spark plug leads, they've got like a weird little, it's almost like each one has like a mechanism in it, the spark plug leads, but it's like something on coil. And they're about $100 each, and they all needed to be replaced, so I didn't want to repair it, and then it got crashed, and then I sold it to some guy for $500, as was. He came and picked it up, gave me 10 pineapples, he was happy with it, and that was good enough for me. And next up, so we got the Falcon, we got all that. So after the Falcon, we had the Avalon. Now you've seen, if you're a big, the few of these cars have made it into YouTube videos, and a few of them haven't. Avalon was another, oh, I'm going to be mean, put it in B. I'm going to put it in B. So really basic interior, get in your right tier. Really basic interior, but randomly good on petrol. Like, it's a V6 3 litre, but it sips petrol all day. Like, it just does. I actually thought it was a step down from the Camry, but the Avalon's actually supposed to be a step up. The styling is very dated. But apart from that, there's nothing else to really say bad about the car. It obviously had faded paint. It was like $1,000. And yeah, it was like $1,000. It had faded paints, automatic, drove real nice, drove real smooth, drove straight on the roads. But yeah, it was a great little car, and it never overheated, never gave me any problems. I never spent a cent on maintenance. At this point, I'm much less meticulous with cars as far as the upkeep goes. Like, now I only service my current cars like 4 times a year, 3 or 4 times a year, regardless of how many kilometers they've done. I just make sure it's like, oh, it's summer, I better change the oil again. You know, but this car, yeah, it was great. I think I chucked a new tire on it, but yeah, we had it for about 8 months, but it was a hard 8 months. Like, we did a lot of kilometers in it. Another little random car. I've messed up the timeline here. I'm going to chuck this in D tier. Like, it definitely deserves, no, not C tier. This is the one car. Look at all these shit boxes. This is the one car my wife's actually complained about. This car looks like it was made out of a freaking aluminium drinking can. Like, it's so cheaply made. Like, so Holden, a lot of the time, so like with my Holden Rodeo, it's actually an Isuzu. So Holden didn't always exactly make cars. Sometimes just had them imported. And this uses an Isuzu motor and a Pajero base, more or less, from what I can see. So it's kind of like a cheap Pajero, and this is back when four-wheel drives weren't comfortable. It had power steering, but this car actually was leaking petrol from the ignition. But yeah, I was excited to have a cheap four-wheel drive for $1,000, but just wasn't to be, unfortunately. So I passed it on to somebody else for exactly $1,000. And that's just the, and yeah, again, it was like, you know, I told him, yeah, it can smell petrol. I'm not quite sure what it is, but this is what I think it is. This is what I paid for it. I think I cleaned it up a bit. Like, it had rust holes in it, and I just kind of scrubbed it with a wire brush until it got like a little bit shiny. You can't, when it comes to an old piece of shit like that, you can't be like cutting the rust out, because you're not gonna be left with any car by the time you cut all the rust out. And 2, like, nobody really cares. I took advantage of it being white and just filled in, after I did that, filled in those holes with silicone, and then just like scrubbed it back with sandpaper so it was all flat and just painted it white, and hit it with rust converter before painting it. So that was like, in my mind, the rust is now cured. Rust converter, spray can, white paint spray can, clear spray can, and that was it. As far as I was concerned, it was fixed. There was like one of these black things that was missing. I just cut another piece of plastic, put it there. So I cleaned it up a little bit. It was slightly less horrible to look at, when I sold it, but still pretty rank. And I think we're up to the Honda Odyssey. So right now, my current cars, and this is going straight in S tier, by the way. This is a beautiful car. I think I've left a review somewhere else on my channel. But the Honda Odyssey 03 V6L, I bought it for $4,500. It was actually advertised for $5,500, but I just said to the guy while I was test driving it, I was like, oh, okay, so what would, I was talking about the car, and he's like, and he said, oh, even if I could get $4,500 for it, that'd be okay. But like, as a passing comment, I said, yeah, I'll give you $4,500 for it. And this after we've already test drove it for like a half hour. But yeah, it drives beautifully smooth. It's such a luxurious big car, 6-seater. Rather than having 8 cramped seats, you've got like 4 captain seats and then 2 little seats in the back. Climate control. Yeah, just everything. I plan on having this car for another couple of years at least. Yeah, tow ball. And I think that's it. So what do we got here? Have I forgotten anything? So we've got 4, 5, 14, 17, 19, 22. I actually got 22 cars. So yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm not quite sure who the target demographic here is. But yeah, if you like talking about nuggets, I'm definitely your guy. Anyway, like and subscribe for more content. Usually my videos are a lot shorter than this.